The Confederation of Indian Industry organized a discussion titled Global Economic Policy Summit 2021 Rebuilding Economics in the National Capital on November 17 and 18. Taking part in the discussion, Union Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia fielded questions and concerns of the industry players. Mr. Scindia made it clear that he knows his business well and was able to garner the confidence of one and all at the summit, he said.
Then you have your MROs, you have your flying training organizations, you have cargo, you have ground handling, you've got manufacturing in airspace, you've got regional airlines and helicopters to provide that last mile connectivity, which by the way is extremely important in India because we have the lowest penetration today per capita helicopters across the world. And that cannot be the case anymore, right? So I've come out with a new helicopter policy, which will boost the usage of helicopters, the acquisition of helicopters in India. And then finally, academia and consultants, which are also important. But all of these 9 advisory groups are met personally by me. Accountability is amongst all of us. And when topics are identified, then the accountability of those points are put in place. And when the advisory groups meets again, then we are accountable to each other. So for example, out of 10 points, if 5 points are attributed to my ministry, I have to revert to the advisory group on the progress made thus far on those 5 points since the last time I met. That's when we work as a team. It's not us versus them, it's a we approach, because when it's a we approach, only then can we win.
That's very good. So in a sense, you're taking the process mantra down into your system. And you're right. In fact, that was going to be my next question, because it's not only about the big, shiny airports, and of course we have a few of them. It's about the entire ecosystem. And we have been accused of having a system which is somewhat restricted for free flow of the entire system to be operational and to tap its full potential. And we do know the air transportation has an absolutely wonderfully multiplier effect on any economy and prosperity, on people, on jobs. It is just enormous. We don't normally think, as you said, there are many, many layers below and behind what we actually see. So the open skies was one big move which happened some years ago. What are the next big things that we can hope to see? You have announced a new plan for privatization of giving up or selling off the government shares in the airports, etc. Do you see that getting implemented as currently planned and announced? Do you see any hurdle? You have, of course, seen a wonderful recent success of Air India's sale. So does that give more hope, excitement, and charge up your team to get on with the rest of them?
So Sunil, industry should not be excited only about sales. Industry
got to be
excited about, for the lack of a better word, no pun intended, the runway. Right? Industry's got to be excited about, again, no pun intended, the takeoff path. Right? Where is this industry headed? Or what is our path to growth? Right? And I see that coming not necessarily only from the divestment process. That's an important part, but also understand why, and I'm not going to call it the divestment process either, because the structuring of the transactions is more of a lease transaction. It's not a privatization, it's not a divestment. We are looking at a 50-year lease on all these airports. The current airports that we have also transacted upon, the current 6 are 50-year leases, which means that once it's transferred to the private party then puts in the capex, puts in the growth, profits from the revenue potential, and at the end of 50 years, it comes back to government along with all the assets that's been built on the ground as is. So it's a win-win for both parties. So for me, the most important part, as I mentioned before, is to really establish the ecosystem in India. MROs are important for me. We have a 90,000 crore business today. 15% of that is MROs. So we're talking about 13,500 crores. Only 20% of that service is done in India today. So you're talking about MROs being a very small sliver of 2,000 crores out of a pie of almost 13,500 crores on a fleet size which is only 710, which is going to grow by a CAGR of close to 30-40% over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I can envisage a fleet size in India over the next decade of at least 2,000 planes, if not more. So therefore, we need to establish that system in India. We have the engineering talent, we have the capability. And there's no reason why we cannot attract these majors across the world, the Airbuses, the Boeings, the Safrans, the Pratt & Whitneys, and what have you, to come and establish within India. It's important for me to establish flying training organizations in India. We have a requirement of 9,500 pilots, 90% of whom get trained abroad today. Think of the drainage of Forex from our economy's perspective, right? But the issue with both MROs and FTOs was you had a very restrictive policy. You had an absurd amount of royalty being charged from fledgling outfits that are starting up. You had an absurd amount of land rental being charged because it's priced land rental in an airport. So I've come out in the last 90 days or less than 90 days, 60 days, with a new policy for MROs, with a new policy for FTOs, which has completely abolished royalty, which has brought down rental rates to 10% of what they used to be, from crores to about 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs. And we brought in policies that will lead to an upsurge in both of these sectors. The third area, and one of the most important areas for me, is drones. That's going to transform the way, not the way we do business alone, but it's going to transform the way we live in the next 10 to 15 years. Two things are going to change the world, the way I see it, over the next decade and a half. One is drones. The second is fuel. The fact that we're going to move away from fossils, whether it's coal, diesel, petrol and all of that, to solar, hydrogen and all of that. It's going to transform the way we live our lives. And we in India need to be at the cusp of that change. As Prime Minister said, we've got to stop being followers, i.e. auto, i.e. telecom. We've got to become leaders. And here is the inflection point for us. And we've got to grab that opportunity. Which is why you've seen that never before has any government in the past acted with so much alacrity as we have in the last year. We came out of the US policy in March 2021. I'm talking about 10 months ago. And within 5 months, we completely redid that policy and came out with a new drone policy on the 28th of August when I post my assuming charge, which has completely deregulated the space, done away with permissions, done away with fees, come out with very, very cohesive, clear steps for investors. And within 3 weeks of the new drone policy coming out, never heard of before, and only because of the Prime Minister's personal thrust on this, come out with a PLI scheme for the drone sector, a productivity linked scheme for the drone sector. And guess what? The incentive for the PLI scheme in the drone sector is 2 times the size of the drone industry today. 60 crores is the size of our industry. It's in its infancy, but it's going to assume a hockey stick demand growth over the next 5 to 10 years. The PLI scheme, which is 20% of your value addition in that sector, is 120 crores over 3 years. So government changes the policy and makes it investor friendly, consumer friendly, process friendly in 5 months, comes out with a PLI policy within 3 weeks of that new policy, and within 30 days of that new policy, we've come out with an airspace map, which clearly demarcates red areas, green areas, yellow areas. And this, mind you, is a laborious process. You've got to coordinate with all horizontal ministries of central government, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and across the board, atomic energy. And you've got to coordinate with 36 state government stroke UTs. And we came out with that within 30 days. And it's as clear as the US airspace map or the European airspace map, where red areas have been kept to a minimum, yellow limited, and green the maximum. So we are moving at an exponential pace. Now, I talked about the very low per capita penetration in helicopters. We have 280 helicopters in our country, for a country that has the size of 130 crore people. We've got hilly states, we've got northeastern states, we've got Jammu and Kashmir. We've got last mile connectivity issue across our states. We've got a huge Bharatmala and a national highway stream, but when accidents happen, you have only 7 golden minutes. We need to use HEMS, helicopter emergency medical services, to transport people. Now we've got to look at a good financial model to make that happen. But I came out with a new helicopter policy, which is again done away with all transaction costs, all parking charges, all landing charges, all RNSC charges, all TNLC charges. Heli Seva portal, where you can access that portal, get clearance for your flight path, and you're on your way. No cumbersome telephone calls and waiting for ATCL and so on and so forth. So we've got to become customer-centric. We've got to become customer-facing. We've got to be looking at the pain points and resolving them. And for me, that is that runway. And finally, ensuring that we have regional airlines, last-mile connectivity, and we introduce wide-bodied aircraft to get back our share of international connectivity. My ultimate aim is I want a hub created in India. I do not want to have a hub for Indians outside India. We need to create our hub in our country for 130 crore people. And finally, gentlemen sitting back there, cargo. Huge potential in India. Think about it, in COVID, we have gone from 2% of international cargo share to 19% in a COVID environment. In the last 3 years, from 7 freighters, we've gone to 28 freighters. It's a huge opportunity for us in India. So we as government have to work with our stakeholders to make it happen. And that's the role I want to play with industry.
So, frankly, this is very, very encouraging and a delight to hear. I should both compliment you and thank you. That's the direction India needs to go in. And the quicker we can do it, the better. I had a whole bunch of questions, but I can see there are a number of questions that CB has also received, and I believe you have a time constraint. If you can give us a little bit more time, we'll try and fire those at you. Another 10 minutes? Okay, great. So, CB, you want to take on?
No, yeah. Just a few questions from the floor. I'd rather give time to that. And you've actually answered all the questions that I was thinking of asking.
I have a few more.
Last mile connectivity and so on. But one thing, more of a bread and butter issue for the Janta, if I can say. When can we see more or less normalization of flights over here? International operations, global airlines, all of them operating. And basically, will it be like what we had pre-COVID or will it be on commercial terms, or should we expect bubbles to continue for some more time? What it would be like? I had that, as a question, but there are 3 very vital questions from the floor.
So Chandraji, let me please take that first, because I think it's an important question, and I think it's there's a lot of reverberation on that question across the board. I mentioned to you, my role is to be a constructive collaborator, but I have to make sure that we keep that door completely open for travel, but we keep that door completely shut for the virus. Now that's easier said than done, right? But as you have seen, since I've taken over on the 5th of July, I believe, over the last 2.5, 3 months, we have, on a process-driven mode, come back to normalcy. When I came in, we were at 50% capacity, domestically. We went to 62.5%, we went to 75%, we went to 85%, and on the 18th of October, we've gone back to 100% capacity. Next, we could only serve meals on airplanes which had a flying time of 2 hours or more, understandably to mitigate risk with regard to COVID. As of yesterday, that's been done away with. So now we can serve meals on any flight at any point of time. So we're coming back to normalcy. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, Chandraji, as humans we tend to forget very quickly. The world has not seen this sort of pandemic in the last 100 years. India has gone through a huge process, and thanks to Prime Minister Modi's resolve on the vaccination, we're today at close to 112 crore vaccines in India, which is a world record. You're close to about 40% vaccinations on the second jab and almost 80% vaccinations on first jab, right? But we have to be careful. I'm following the process. This is a decision also, please understand that I cannot take alone. It has to be a joint decision of government along with the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Health, and there has to be a dialogue in that process. From an economic standpoint, makes complete sense. Needs to be done yesterday. But I need to wear the hat of not only civil aviation, but also to wear the hat of a citizen of India. So let me commit to you that we're evaluating that process. We want to return to normalcy, but we have to return to normalcy keeping in mind what's happening in the world. Within India, we're back to 100%, but don't forget there's still mayhem happening in the world. Look at what's happening in Russia. Look at what's happening in parts of Europe. They're going through a fourth phase with vaccinations. And let's not erase our short-term memory so soon. I had COVID. I was one of the first few to have COVID in early June 2020. And let me tell you, it's the worst thing possible. Many people had asymptomatic COVID. I'm very happy for them. But I would not wish this disease on my enemy. It's that bad. So let's not let down our guard. I am all for regaining our space in the civil aviation arena in the world. I am all for making a hub in India. I am all for more wide-bodied aircraft. And we will get there. But bear with me and trust me. I am on your side. We will work together, but in a safe environment. And that's all I'd like to add.
That's sensible.
Salil, would you like to? Salil, William, and Amit. Three is what we have.
For joining us, Honorable Minister. I serve as the chairman of the CII Aerospace Committee, and also am president.
Keep the mic very close to you.
I'm also president of Boeing in India. Yesterday at the conference, there was discussion about the empowered group of secretaries and others from different ministries coming together to encourage or assist in manufacturing in semiconductors. Given the priority of aero manufacturing in both civil and defense, do you think there's an opportunity to do something similar for aero manufacturing?
Well, I've visited multiple facilities, including Salil's facilities, when I was in Hyderabad recently. And as I mentioned, I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of aircraft manufacturing in India. And I think companies like his and others have proven that India is a reliable Six Sigma country to produce in. I think we need to explore all possibilities in that sector. And as I've mentioned to you in our interactions as well in our advisory group, I think we need to work together to make sure that happens. There are tremendous amount of synergies between the civil space and the defense space. And I think that there's a greater realization of that as well. And I'm more than happy to work with you to make that happen.
So, William Blair.
Honorable Minister, following on Salil Gupta, I'm the Chief Executive for Lockheed Martin here in India. And your comment about the synergy between defense and the civil domain space, I think, is so critical right now more than ever. We've seen a lot of growth in the aerospace and defense ecosystem. You saw it firsthand, as you mentioned, when you were in Hyderabad. I welcome and appreciate the new policy that you came out with on helicopters, for instance. And we see a future here in India where not just producing aircraft, and in our case producing helicopters in India, with essentially the same platform to meet both the civil requirement and especially maybe the urgent need for emergency response, as well as VVIP and the multiple missions that it can meet, while at the same time meeting the naval utility requirement. And one aspect, I think, with the pace at which you're driving the policies, if we can also think about how we're capturing India's center of innovation, especially in the AI, machine learning, and quantum computing space. Because for us, that's how we think we can leapfrog the world in some ways in terms of bringing technologies that we bring on our platforms that we build here in India to meet India's requirements and then also meet export. And so I think as the policies evolve that give us a tailwind rather than a headwind to do that, I very much appreciate your efforts because we see so much synergy between the defense and commercial space to really accelerate our path forward, which is going to translate to exports. Thank you.
So, William, let me just turn what you said on its head a little bit. I firmly believe that, and this is a notion that we started with even in the auto sector, when a lot of companies like Hyundai and Ford and all were looking to set up base in India, and the whole thinking was domestic market and then export. I really believe in the aerospace sector, for yourself and for Salil and your colleagues in other companies. I think India can become the production center for the world. And then analogous to that, you can also service our domestic requirements. You've got to be able to turn that on its head. And for that, we have to help you to make that happen. And as a member of the cabinet, as a member of this government, I am today committing to you that from my side, we will do what has to be done to make that happen. We've had one advisory group meeting where both of you have been present. I think another one is due where I think you all have to actually, if you recall, come to me and let me emphasize that there are not many ministers who say that, but educate me on what needs to be done so that I can become your proponent to make sure that that gets done.
Amit from Blade India. I also chair the task force for short-term mobility for CII. A month back, you announced sweeping changes in the helicopter policy, including air corridors, and I'm happy to that we are flying full on all those air corridors, right, that we're doing right now. We just ordered the next 10 helicopters, right, at the Dubai Air Show. Right. My question to you, sir, is that just like in road mobility, we are seeing sweeping changes in electric, right? Our joint venture partner is testing more than 20 electric aircraft in the US, and my question is, just like you facilitated these changes, how is your department going to facilitate the electric revolution, which is going to happen very soon? Thank you.
So first of all, congratulations and well done. In your success lies our success. And I think that's the mantra that we live with every day. Not only have we got those 3 air corridors done, which you're now using tremendously, but we have a pipeline of future corridors. And what we mean by corridors, for those who don't have that vertical knowledge, is today the airspace is the same for air as well as helicopters. So we are carving out a corridor that will be used only by helicopters, and therefore all your ATC approvals and so on and so forth are at a click of your fingers, and it's a dedicated corridor only for choppers. Along with that, additional corridors, we're also setting up 5 heli-hubs in India. I don't know whether you're aware of that, but we're going to do we're trying to do one in Akshardham, so an additional one to Rohini, one in Juhu, one in Guwahati. We are negotiating with HAL for one in Bangalore, and there is a 5th. It's not top of mind right now, but we've got 5 heli-hubs that we're developing, which will be devoted only to helicopters. The aspect that on the query that you have raised has to do with really source of fuel, and whether that's electric, through electric, or it is through biofuels, which are also on the anvil, whether it's going to eventually come in the form of hydrogen, which is also on the anvil, or everything that is on our radar. And we will evolve very quickly from a policy-making perspective to facilitate that happening.
Mr. Scindia informed the full House audience regarding his efforts to reduce operating cost of airlines by requesting states, union territories to reduce taxes on ATF, he said.
As far as the VAT is concerned, you can look at that 2 ways. Either to include VAT as part of GST, which is a more direct way of doing it, but it has to go through a process, which is the GST Council and so on and so forth. The second is a more laborious process, and I believe in following the more difficult route in life always. So I've taken it upon myself to approach 22 chief ministers, where the VAT on ATF is beyond 5%, and coordinate, plead, request every chief minister to lower the VAT on ATF to enable more connectivity. And in the last 2 months, I'm very happy to report to my stakeholders that 7 state governments have slashed their VAT from 28 to 30% down to 1 to 2%. Cabinet, what do I mean by that? Cabinet decisions, meetings have been held. It has been passed in the respective state/UT cabinet. Notification has been issued, and that notification is with me. And through this forum, I would like to congratulate those state governments and UT leaders for their foresight. Starting with Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, Andaman and Nicobar, moving on to state governments, state government of Uttarakhand, the state government of Himachal, the state government of Haryana, the state government of Madhya Pradesh. So we have 7 states that have already slashed VAT or ATF. So I have now to work on the balance 17. And I'm doing that every day. Yesterday I had a VC with the Chief Minister of Gujarat. I requested him. The Chief Minister of Tripura has committed to me, but I'll only talk about that when I have that notification in my hand, because without that it's still up in the air. So there are multiple state governments that are going to follow this path as well, and hopefully we'll have that reduced so that we can make this a much more lucrative sector for aviation and provide greater connectivity.
You are watching Travel World Online.